When people think about defense, they often focus on the final platform, the tank, the ship, the vehicle you see on the front page. But beneath every one of those platforms is something maybe less visible but just as important: mobility, power, reliability. In an era of rearmament and modernization, defense capability increasingly comes down to whether systems can move faster, operate longer, and perform reliably in extreme conditions. RENK sits right at the heart of that challenge. It enables the platforms upon which defense capabilities are built, and that makes it one of the most interesting companies in Europe's defense industrial base today. I'm Mobeen Tahir, Director of Macroeconomics and Thematic Research at WisdomTree, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Dr. Alexander Sagel, CEO of RENK. Welcome to the show, Alexander.
Mobeen, a fantastic introduction. Thank you very much for the warm words. And as you can imagine, I'm fully set and prepared to support your statements about reliable and battle-proven unique mobility systems for critical land and sea platforms. Good to be here.
It is our pleasure to be talking to you, and we've seen the great things RENK has been doing, and we would love to dive deeper into all of those topics. But before we talk about RENK and every part of the business and all the good things you are doing and what's to come, I'd love to start with you. You've built your own career across engineering, industrial leadership. I know your CV has names like Daimler and Rheinmetall and so forth. And you worked in complex manufacturing environments. What originally drew you to this space and ultimately led you to take on this role of CEO at RENK? Would love to hear about your own journey.
And that's a good question, because at the very end, it's a way and a career path with many crossroads and junctions. And everything started actually by the very smart advice of my father: Guy, you should study physics, because if you study physics, you almost can do everything. So I followed this advice. I studied physics, and after completing my studies, I decided to make my PhD. And during the PhD, I moved to various places in US, to the University of Madison, Wisconsin, to the Caltech, etc., etc. And then I had to go back to finalize my PhD thesis. Until this time, I still wanted to make an academic career by going back to US, doing a postdoc, and maybe even become a professor. Happily, it didn't work out, because when I came back to finish my PhD thesis, I was hired by Daimler-Benz. 4 weeks later, I had a new contract, Daimler-Chrysler, because this was the time of the merger between these two companies. And then I spent, I think, 7 years working within Daimler. I was part of the post-merger integration team, so I moved to Detroit, trying to see from a technology point of view how we can realize synergies. After this, I had some other career steps, in the advanced engine development and in the truck area. And then, I think this was in 2005, I got a call from a headhunter if I had the interest to switch the site from OEM to a tier 1 supplier, tier 1 commodity supplier. And this was actually Rheinmetall Automotive. So I started in 2005 to work for Rheinmetall Automotive, and during the next 19 years, I had a quite active career, because I moved up to the head of business units. I do believe I'm the only executive at Rheinmetall today who was running 3 out of 4 divisions. So I was running the automotive division. Then later on, the cross move into the defense part of the business, the CEO of weapon and ammunition, and then at the end, the CEO of the electronic solution business. And then it was somewhere in 2023, I got a call from my predecessor, Susanne Wiegand, who was the CEO before me. And I knew Susanne quite a long time before, also from working at Rheinmetall. And she asked, Alexander, I have a very short list, and I'm calling on behalf of the supervisory board. And this was the trigger at the very end. A clear decision after 2 or 3 weeks to make this move, to leave Rheinmetall and to start working as the 3rd executive board member, responsible for operations and the entire operational business, operated business at the RENK Group. And then lastly, almost 1 year ago, in February 2025, I took over the role as the CEO of the RENK Group AG. And I can tell you, this was a very easy decision because I knew RENK from my past at my former employee. And we had a lot of relationships and connections on project development, on land platforms. And Mobeen RENK is truly unique positioned. If it comes to reliable, high-performing mobility solution for very sophisticated land and sea platforms, it's always RENK. It's a unique market position. On the other side, a lot of room for further improvement. And the combination of everything, this is the reason why I'm here, why I'm very happy to run this company, driving forward and setting this pace for the next decade at the very end.
I certainly heard the pun, driving it forward. I love it, given the mobility solutions.
Excellent.
And we did speak to Rheinmetall on this show a few months ago. We had Dirk Winkels, the head of investor relations. What a fascinating company, Rheinmetall, and it's great to hear. Of course, you contributed to its growth for pretty much 2 decades there. But now, of course, you are running and driving RENK. And I'm curious, I know you spoke about mobility solutions. How do you introduce? Because RENK has such a unique place in the defense ecosystem, given the technologies that it develops. How do you introduce what RENK does, and why is it so important in the ecosystem that it sits in?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at RENK, and if you give me 60 seconds, RENK's market position is unique. Our product space and our USP is, as you perfectly summarized, Mobeen, is mobility. Mobility for land platforms and for naval platforms. We have a product portfolio which is quite focused on transmissions, on engines, on drive systems, hybrid systems within these two domains. Having said this, I think one very unique selling and equity point of view is for sure our very strong market position. I mean, if you talk about the accessible market, which of course excludes China and Russia, etc., we have with our land products a market presence of more than 75%. So this is a very strong market share, which is allowing us to conduct what we call so-called a locked-in business model. Because once you are qualified on these platforms, like tanks, for example, or if you talk about frigates or corvettes, once you are qualified on these platforms, usually you will stay for the entire lifetime of this platform. If you take the average lifetime of a tank platform between 20 to 40 years, if you take the lifetime of a destroyer, whatever, 40 to 60 years, this is a unique business model, not only talking about upstream business, but also the entire downstream business, which is driving to the fact that RENK is not only strong on selling new parts on the new OD business, but I think we have a unique position if you compare us to the European defense companies by having a strong aftermarket share of today round about 40%. And I think all this together provides a financially attractive package, provides us with cash and liquidity to manage the future growth and also to expand into new technologies.
Excellent. And you did mention the European defense relevance to your business. And of course, from Wisdom Tree's perspective, our interest in RENK started last year when we went into the European defense space and launched an investment strategy there. And that's when we became an investor as a company in RENK. And of course, we've seen incredible interest, like the sort of interest we've never seen in any asset class or topic before that we've seen in European defense since last year. I'm curious, of course, how you see it. Of course, there's a structural shift happening in the European defense, and very important. Of course, you make mobility solutions not just for defense, but defense doing what it's been doing in the last few months and years, given the structural shift. How do you interpret, from your vantage point, what's going on in this sector and how important is it for your business?
That's a very good point, Mobeen. And if you look back just about 12 months ago, we had in 2024, we had in February our IPO and our equity story and our capital market story from this IPO. And after this IPO was very strong. We assumed a certain constant growth in our key markets in Europe, in North America, and Asia Pacific. No one could predict what happened after the Munich Security Conference in February last year, which ultimately gave a massive kick to the entire defense industry, to the overall understanding from a European perspective, and really clear understanding that if you look in the future, we cannot rely on partnerships. We cannot rely on the US Army to defend our interests. And here the trigger was clearly the Munich Security Conferences. And for RENK, I mean, we are today a company where we have round about 3/4 of our business is defense. The last quarter is what we call the civil business, transmission, couplings, etc., for a broad application in various industrial segments, driven by this massive push on the European market. I mean, you must imagine the European defense budget will increase from round about 430 billion in the year 2024 to 900, even sometimes 1 trillion in the year 2029-2030. Germany will go from 80 to 160 to 165 until the end of this decade. So there is an extremely strong push also from the budget point of view, which is driving, of course, the entire defense business, and which is driving, for example, RENK to transform from a 75% as of today defense company into 90% plus defense, almost pure defense play towards the end of this decade. And I think what is also very important, this trend what we see in Europe is, first of all, independent of any kind of cease and ceasefire agreement in Ukraine, absolutely independent. It's fundamentally, it's structured, it's strong, it's supported. In the second part, it's not only for 5 or for 10 years. So this will be a program for 10, 15, and 20 years. It's very interesting if you observe the change in the perspective of the capital market. 3 years ago, it was really difficult to get access to capital for growth, for whatever, for financing organic growth. Today, it's the opposite. We have discussions with the CEO of leading national, international banks. We have various capital market participants who really want to invest strongly into the European defense sector, but especially into the German defense sector. So here we are.
That's a great overview. And of course, that is a key question we get all the time from investors, that is the European defense story just about, say, the Ukraine conflict? Is it a cyclical upswing or is it a structural story? And we always emphasize that, of course, this is all about making sure something like that doesn't happen in the future. And so Europe is serious about rearming itself, strengthening its defenses, and going to 3.5% defense spending from whatever 1.5 to 2% is not something that will happen overnight. So it's great to hear from you that you see the same sentiment, certainly, and the trends from your side. I'm curious now, of course. I would love to dive deeper into your product range. Now, we talked about mobility, we talked about how RENK enables some very important defense technologies. Now, uh, my understanding is RENK's core strengths lie in transmissions, drivetrains, power solutions. These are the things that enable so many technologies that are built on top. How do you think about RENK's product portfolio today, and where do you see the most strategic value being created among the products that you are developing and making today?
I mean, you just gave almost a perfect summary, to be honest, because if you take our revenue from 2025 or 2024, as I just said, 3/4 is defense, from our defense business, 60 or 70% is generated by our land transmissions. So land transmissions, especially with a strong focus on track transmissions. In track transmissions, we are talking about platform weights from 10 tons, light tracked vehicles, up to 60, 70 tons, heavy main battle tanks, but also wheeled vehicles, for example. The complexity of a land transmission, it's sometimes hard to understand. You must see it, so you're always welcome to visit us and to have a look at field trip. But I think if you take a land transmission and you compare it with a Swiss watch, for example, a land transmission for a main battle tank has a weight of 2.5 tons, has more than 35,000 parts, which needs to be integrated into this transmission. The packaging density of this transmission has a value above 90%. So this gives an indication how complex this land transmission is. And I think it's part of RENK's unique market position that we have for all kinds of platforms. The perfect transmission, drive, and mobility solution. And this is not only for conventional transmission, so conventional, I'm talking about mechanical transmission, but also if it comes to hybridization, if it comes to electrification, and if it comes to digitalization. For us, we do see a significant market developing beyond 2030, when you will see on the market more unmanned platforms, unmanned track platforms for different use cases. And we see RENK and our transmissions as the key enabler to provide this autonomy by digitalization of our transmission to these platforms. This market is today not at all explored. It's just in development. But this does not mean that beyond 2030, the conventional platforms will die. There is a long-term, and I like this term, defense super cycle for the next 10, 15, and 20 years who is driving us. And we are positioning ourselves. We have an approach saying next gen mobility roadmap, where we are upgrading until the end of this decade all of our today's mobility products. Yes, to perfectly summarize it: transmission, drive systems, generators, engines, conventional engines, by a digital capability. And the next phase of this is trying to understand what will be the additional incremental product portfolio beyond mobility in the future.
There's so much to unpack in that response. By the way, I would love to take you up on that offer of a field trip. I think that sounds great, and
Always
we
welcome.
will be very excited at Wisdom Tree to avail that offer. But of course, you mentioned things like hybridization, electrification, and of course the autonomous. I think that is a very interesting thing we hear increasingly from defense companies. Even Rheinmetall, they were talking about how land vehicles are becoming increasingly autonomous. I'm curious how you approach your R&D, because all of these technologies and innovations, they don't happen overnight. It requires a lot of research and development behind the scenes for these things to happen. In the world of commercial vehicles, we've been seeing how autonomous driving has been proving to be such a big challenge for such a long time. Uh, how is it different in the world of defense, and just how are you approaching R&D, and what challenges and opportunities you see over there?
There may be a more general comment before I focus on RENK. You are absolutely right. Autonomy is a key capability for various future platforms across all domains. While I'm talking about all domains, we do not only talk about autonomous capability for trucks or for whatever kind of manned, unmanned platforms. We also talk about UAVs, so not we as RENK, but defense industry and capability requirements from our MOBs are going into the air, into this space, into cyber. And autonomy will be everywhere needed, and it's absolutely needed for modern, let's talk about this, warfare, battlefield scenarios. From a RENK point of view, we are predominantly focus on providing autonomy to our customers for their tracked platforms. And the approach is very simple, but also very complicated. But in any case, it's supporting our approach. When you talk about tracked vehicles, the center of gravity for mobility, meaning driving, steering, and braking, everything is managed and provided by a transmission. If you compare this to, for example, wheeled vehicles, these three functions, driving, steering, and braking, are three different and independent systems. This underlies the difference in the complexity between transmissions, for example, of wheeled vehicles for transmission of tracked vehicles. By this fact that a transmission is responsible for driving, braking, and steering, if you provide, for example, drive-by-wire capabilities, and you combine it with the software and, of course, artificial intelligence for data fusion, you can generate a capability in order to drive and to control track platforms autonomously. And I think this is the basic approach and the basic path of RENK towards this new field of so-called unmanned ground vehicles, in short UGVs, which will become, from our estimate, a mass market beyond 2030. Why? There will be always a different approach how to use our soldiers, much more careful. A soldier is a very precious and expensive resource, so we need to protect our soldiers. We will have increasing platforms, so for this reason, unmanned platforms will grow in parallel to the manned platforms. And again, by the function of a transmission, especially for tracked vehicles, RENK is in a truly unique position to harness this growth in regards to autonomy.
I imagine as we speak about autonomy, this is something that is very much related to, of course, this is a technological idea, right? And you mentioned digitization a few times already. Now, if we think about the defense sector, traditionally, you would think about, okay, this is manufacturing of all the stuff we need. A main battle tank, for example, you need the steel, you need the various things that make a main battle tank. But when we spoke to Rheinmetall, the one term that stood out, they said tanknology, and we spoke to them about it because it's as much about the tank as it is about technology, because the digitization of these things is really what makes them future proof. So is the integration of modern cutting edge technologies, AI, digitization, is this just an incremental process of your manufacturing becoming entering the new phase, or is this something is this a new capability? Like, are you thinking of technology as a separate pillar to traditional manufacturing, or is the integration already in place and you're just building one layer on top of the other?
That's a good question, but I think I should separate the answer into two pillars. Technology is one terminology, and I think I like this branding from Rheinmetall. And we have a different one. We are saying software-defined mobility. Yeah, because what we see in the future is that incremental to our today's technology, this is primarily driven by mechanics, tribology, hydraulics, etc., by adding this digital layer, starting physically in form of a drive-by-wire system, software, etc., we are enabling and providing totally new capabilities to existing conventional platforms, but as I just explained also, if you talk about unmanned ground vehicles, into new platforms. So this technology is absolutely right, because a tank, as of today, is not anymore welded and bended steel and you have a big cannon. It's an extremely smart data center where you have the 360 degrees visibility of the battlefield, all the data and sensors, not only from your tent, but also from the different domains, are just coming in, getting fused, and allowing the commander to approach and to make the right decisions. And our transmission, in our vision, will be in the future a very important capability enabler for such tanks. Because, for example, in this digitalized tank, our digitalized transmission can provide key tactical concept of operations, silent drive, fast acceleration, or even autonomous drive. So one is calling this technology, we are calling this a next-gen mobility or software-defined defense mobility. But this is independent. Yes, it's independent to what you touched before, Mobeen, about production. I mean, as you know, driven by the increasing spending of the Europeans and the German army and starting significant increase in our total order backlog and order intakes, etc., etc. The key task of all defense companies currently in Europe, but especially in Germany, is execution, operational execution. Because I'm sure you know, we talked before about additional or a budget growth on the European level to 900 billion or even to 1 trillion. What was missing during the last 30 years, the so-called peace dividend, how we call it, and the budget and the funding of the different armies, MODs, navies, whatever, the budget is there. And we had this called even, a little bit earlier, the European nations, especially if you talk about Germany as a lead role, if you talk about the Nordic countries, if you talk about the Baltic countries, if you talk about the Eastern European countries, absolutely clear, committed, structural approach to increase defense capabilities, to rearm their nations and structurally finance. There might be differences if you go a little bit further west from the Eastern front line, if you want to call it. If you talk about France, if you talk about Spain, there might be a different speed or pace in order to approach the 3.5%, because maybe these countries do not feel the pressure, like, for example, Poland is feeling, or like the Baltics are feeling. So the key point is, it's not anymore about the money, it's about operational execution, making sure that as soon as possible, as speedy as possible, our troops, for example, the German Bundeswehr, is getting the needed capabilities and the volumes. And this is now in the hands, in the full responsibility of the defense industry. And this is our focus, where we will almost triple our capacity in the next 4 years.
Very good. I love that that detail and color. Certainly, an exciting topic. This for us to track. I'm curious. I'm keen to explore the powertrain a little bit, like the hybridization topic. A few years ago, when I moved from a diesel car myself to an electric car, the biggest change in the experience was that you don't hear anything. Of course, when you're sitting inside or you're walking along and an electric car goes by, you don't hear anything. I imagine, of course, that as just a consumer driving around, that's an added layer of comfort. But on the battlefield, I imagine where not getting detected is an important thing. Stealth features and all that. Being quieter is quite a powerful thing. But of course, new powertrains come with their own challenges, and you have to charge batteries, and you have to have that infrastructure, and of course, then armies and forces have to think about their logistics quite differently compared to how they have been thinking about it in the past. How do you see this evolution in the hybridization and electrification topic, in terms of what are your customers demanding from you, and how's the uptake on this?
I think looking back 2 years, 2 years ago, talking about 2024, 2023, I think there was a little bit a kind of different perspective on the use of hybridization. I mean, at this time, there was a big discussion about a green tank, to have a green tank who is powered by electricity. This electricity is generated by alternative regenerative energy on the battlefield, and we have less fuel consumption, which is, of course, good from a logistical point of view, but I think this was more a perception of green tank. I think it's fair to say you can forget all this. Of course, every army, every brigade is happy if they do not need to transport more fuel and petrol, because this is always a pain. So fuel consumption is always stupid. You perfectly said it. I think the use of hybridization and electrification, from my point of view, is especially to enable certain specific concept of operations. You just said it. Silence is a very rare good. And sometimes you need to be silent in order not to be discovered. This is, by the way, valid for land platforms like for tanks, but it's also valid for frigates and for high value targets like destroyers, etc., because if the transmission, also provided by RENK, is simply too loud and making too much noise, you cannot hear potential submarines, but the submarines, they can hear you. So hybridization is today not, or electrification, to have an electric powertrain, but in order to enable the platform user and the commander to specific tactical operations, like for a limited time, a silent watch, like a fast acceleration if needed, a kind of emergency start. And of course, if you save fuel, it's also very beneficial. From a RED point of view, we launched, I think it was in 2024 on the Eurosatory, and the work first mild hybrid MBT transmission. We call it AirTrax, where we have the generation of the electricity needed for enhanced driving performance, but also to generate additional electricity or electric power for other consumers, like sensors or the digital turret, etc., etc. We presented this on the Eurosatory. It was and still is the first mild hybrid and main battle tank transmission concept. But again, here the electric power is generated by a generator, not by a battery. You need a battery for charging, but it's a small battery. So what I'm saying in a long speech now is, it depends what the concept of operations are to use hybridization and a certain element of electrification. But what was imagined a couple of years ago, you have a green tank in order to reduce CO2 pollution, this is not the case.
Okay, so it depends on the use case and what the customer needs. So speaking of customers, you did mention, of course, Germany, and of course, being a German company, that's your home market. But we know that RENK services many different markets, and I would love to explore how you're building your customer base and how you're servicing it, because one of the topics that always comes up with the defense topic with our investor base is defense is quite unique, and this is a long-term trend. One, because the demand for these things will always be there. The governments are raising their budgets. They're looking, particularly European governments, are looking to buy from European companies. Creates a strong order book, but also with defense companies, there tends to be some sort of a service agreement with their customers. So you have revenues not just recorded at the time that you make the sale, but often you are servicing whatever you are providing your customers as well. So I'm curious to hear from your side how your customer relationships are built and how you are servicing them over time.
It's a very important point and a very fair question, because as I just said before, a couple of minutes before, Mobeen, we have currently a service aftermarket part of our business in the range of 40%. And all what we see by this incremental new business coming from rearm of Europe, rearm of Germany, this is always adding, with a certain delay, a certain lead time, additional long-term aftermarket business. We have today, if we talk about the customer relationships, we have today round about 70 armies as our customers. We have round about 40 navies as our customers. We have an installed base, and this was a number we got in the end of 2023, of more than 180,000 land platforms. 180,000 land platforms across all the 70 armies, which is again the basis for the strong aftermarket and downstream business. Downstream business, we do not only have service. And to answer your question, We have very strong customer relationship to our clients. We just talked about Rheinmetall, but of course, we are serving all the big customers. We have strong relationships to the MODs because it depends. Some MODs are also taking charge for contracting new business, but also some MODs only taking charge of contracting downstream service business. So this depends on the market, on the region, and on the customer, who is our prime. And if we talk about OE business on one side and the aftermarket downstream business on the other side. For the downstream business, and again, as I said, I think there are not so many companies, defense companies, who have that strong business. I'm always saying you could compare us if you talk about jet engine producers who are doing the majority of the business, especially from the margin side, on the aftermarket part of the piece. And I'm always saying RENK is a kind of this, but the only difference is we are also making money on new business. Yeah, so this is again underlining our unique position. For the aftermarket business, we have the MRO part of the downstream segment, so overhaul and repair. And for this, we are doing this in our plants, or we are going to the depots or to the locations where our customers are. And this is, for example, one reason we will install and set up an MRO hub in Poland in order to serve the Polish army, where the Polish army has many platforms where at least one component or one product of RENK is installed there. But we do not only have MRO business, we also have a spare part business. We have full spare part transmissions, but we also have, of course, real spare parts. For example, brake systems, and last but not least, we have field service. So being very close to our customers on the prime side, on the governmental side, having a global footprint in all relevant markets and regions. If you take this revenue split of rate, I think it's a fantastic diversification. We have around about 1/4 Germany, 1/4 is Europe, 1/4 is Asia Pacific, and 1/4, a little bit on the higher end, is US. US is, as of today, our largest market, by the way.
Excellent. So an impressive mix of customers, and of course, if you're serving 70 armies and 40 navies across the world, I imagine you do want to have very strong partnerships in terms of your suppliers and providers of various capabilities. And I know you drew the comparison between fighter jets and your business, and we know to make aircrafts you have lots of different parts going into an aircraft, but I imagine it's something similar for everything that you are manufacturing as well. How do you think about your suppliers and the partnerships that you've built and your supply chains, and what are the most important components of that supply chain to you?
On our way to reach our new midterm target, somewhere between 2.8 and 3.2 billion organically in 2030, there are two main elements which we can control from a RENK point of view. Number one is to build up the capacity, tick in the box, we are in full swing. Number two is to develop our global supply chain. And this is a lot and quite a piece of work. I mean, RENK is starting from a good position because as of today, 70% of our value chain, we are deeply vertical integrated. We have it in our hands. So this is good on one side because we are somehow keeping margins in-house, and on the other side, it's an essential part of the risk mitigation. But in order to support our partners, our suppliers, to continue and to follow us on this strong growth mode in the next 5 to 10 years, we need to work with them. So we are focusing on lead time reductions. We have some critical components where we still have lead times over 700 days. If we would not do strategic or tactical stocking, so putting some of these components, more what we consume in the next 2 or 3 years in our inventory, we could not deliver it in the next 4 years. We are doing this very, very carefully because, of course, we are looking very carefully on the net working capital. if we see that suppliers getting unstable, out of control in the operations or are not behaving on the price side, and we even might acquire them. So this is what we did, for example, in the beginning of 2025. We acquired a small company in Detroit, Michigan, where unfortunately the owner got cancer, and we had to take over first the operations. In the second step, we acquired the company, we secured the workforce, provided a stable job environment, and we had control about key components. We are also doing, if needed, for example, for price reasons, or where we identify that our partners, our suppliers, do not want to grow and ramp up capacity, we are also, and we did it already, do careful, cautious make selection. So to increase a little bit our today, or already very deep vertical integration, in order to make sure we have a good price and to have access to this component. So overall, in a nutshell, building up capacity, controlling our supply chain are the two main essential part of our daily business. And the last word, driven by the nature of our products as of today, mechanical, water pumps, hydraulics, gears, whatever, and we do not depend, and we do not have a risk on rare earth elements or rare earth magnets. We do not have a risk from semi-supply. The total amount what we need on semiconductors and rare earth elements or magnets for the next 5 to 6 years, most likely we did it. You can store it in half of the room where I'm sitting here right now.
Excellent. And of course, Alexander, one related question to that, that we always get asked by investors. So you've got the strong supplier relationships, you've got your customers. You mentioned yourself that 3/4 of your business is serving the defense sector. Now people ask, okay, there's strong demand from governments for more defense equipment and so forth. All these orders coming in to defense companies. Will companies be able to meet that demand? Of course, things don't get built overnight. You can't build all the equipment that needs to be built overnight. And I'm sure governments appreciate that, your customers appreciate that. But there is this sense of urgency to really ramp up defense capabilities, particularly in Europe. How do you think about scaling up to meet all that rising demand? I know some companies talk about repurposing their capabilities and moving capabilities towards the defense sector. Some companies have talked about acquiring certain manufacturing plants. How is RENK approaching this strong surge in defense demand and really meeting and managing customer expectations?
I think it's a key question for the next years to come, and also a key question to answer threats coming from the Russians, for example. Before I talk about RENK, I would like to give a little comment on my insights on the defense industry. I think there's no defense company today who really is not absolutely serious in building up this capacity. Absolutely serious. If you are going into the production halls of our primes, I just mentioned some of the names before, you see absolutely active people, teams, all the entire company is trying, and they will do it, I have no doubts, to ramp up capacity. But it takes time, because to ramp up capacity to build a tank is not like ramping up the capacity for bicycles. So this is much, much more complex. So this is a general statement, and I think every investor should take it for granted that all the defense industry participants fully got it and fully understood it. Now it's on us. We need to deliver. Coming on RENK, we are in a very pleased situation that this is not driven because we are super smart. We are super smart, but this is driven by the fact that our former owner, VW Group, RENK was belonging to the VW Group, and within the VW Group, on the revenue side, RENK was a Cellcom. But on the margin side, it was well above any average automotive margin. And driven by workers' council and unions, RENK always got in the range between 10 to 14% annual in capex from the revenue side. So we are today starting this capacity ramp up from a very well invested industrial base. When I just said before, RENK will almost triple our production output, our production capacity on land transmissions between today and 2029, 2030. We will do this without building any new plant because we will use our existing defense facilities, but we will also convert, we started already, to convert today's civil plants, industrial transmission plants, into defense business, into defense plants. And we have a clear investment plan. And all what we do right now is we are ordering equipment, installing equipment according to our industrialization strategy. Last year, we introduced in the third quarter, here on the main site in Augsburg in Germany, close to Munich, a totally new production concept, which is a really absolutely benchmark. We introduced the so-called modular production line, which is enabling a much higher flexibility depending on the transmission type. We will increase significantly efficiency in providing more capacity. So what we are doing, we are using our existing sites, have a clear investment plan, have changed our production concept here in the main plant in Augsburg to be ready for higher volumes, and now we just execute.
So as you execute and as you look ahead, Alexander, I would love to get your view on what lies ahead. Of course, we've talked about the strong demand in this sector, scaling up production. But as we bring our discussion towards the end and think about what lies ahead in the next 10 years. So let's get your view on the big picture in terms of what trends are you seeing and where RENK is participating in those trends. What do you think are the big currents that people like me and other investors who are following this space should be keeping an eye on? What are the big trends shaping your business and other businesses in this sector going forward that you think we should be paying attention to, and what do you foresee happening in the years to come?
I think the big trend, and we just discussed it about, is the overall market development. I mean, I just talked before about the defense super cycle, and this is not a 5-year cycle, and it's not a 10-year cycle. This is the cycle that will drive us until 2040. If we talk today to German customers about platform volumes and quantities, we talk about 2040 and even beyond sometimes. So this is a long-term trend, and this long-term trend will provide RENK and, of course, our investors with a, I think, very round and sound story of return. We have profitable growth coming organically from the market, from the rearmament of Europe, from the incremental defense spending. By the way, by our market situation in US, also from the increased defense spending for the Navy segment, where we acquired last year a company, one of the two leading gear suppliers to the US Navy in order to explore the segment. So this will drive the conventional business until 2040 and beyond. Conventional platforms. As I mentioned before, RENK is on the way, and this will have impact beyond 2030 because it will take time, 3-4 years, to develop these new capabilities. I mean, we talked about unmanned ground vehicles. This will become a mass market where RENK will play in this field on today's or within today's role as a tier 1 supplier of, I'm always saying, smart mobility solutions, intelligent, smart, digitalized drivetrains, engines, drive system, transmissions, e-generators, etc., or maybe even stepping up together with partners in a kind of prime role. So this will contribute starting 2030, but going beyond 2040 and even more to, from our estimate, from our scenarios, become a new revenue stream. Third, very important, and we are still talking about our core USP, our mobility part. Aftermarket. With all this new business we will get in the next years and really fueling into the market as new business to our customers, we are generating long-term aftermarket business, highly profitable. So there will be, I don't know when, we need to do our exercise here, somewhere beyond 2030, 2035, we will see that our aftermarket share from today, round about 40%, will further develop to maybe 50% or above. A good business. And last but not least, we are talking also about inorganic growth. When we talk about inorganic growth, we have, of course, a clear allocation of companies and targets according to strategic rationales, markets, verticals, horizontals, or technology. And we have companies we are considering at least, who would expand our core business, for example, strengthen our market position in the US, for example, or strengthen our market position in the growing Navy market. Why not land? Because we are already in a super consolidated land mobility market if it comes to tracked vehicles. RENK is absolutely the North Star in regards to technology, but also in regards to market share of 75%. So inorganic might also drive a further diversification into new product groups we are currently evaluating outside of the mobility, but naturally stay in our today's domains. And this is the path internally, and this may be a last word. I'm sure you know, and our investors do know, our midterm targets organically growing from 2025 to 2.8 up to 3 billion. And we also indicated clearly on our Capital Market Day that we see a potential of adding up to 1 billion on top by inorganic growth. You never know if this happens, that there are many factors. But internally, we're not talking about a 3 billion company in the year 2030. We are talking about a 4 billion plus company between 2030 and 2035. So we are fully focused on growth, and we are fully focused on profitable growth. And the return part of this piece is coming from a lean demand for capital. We are growing in the range of 3% of our revenues in CapEx. We have significant improvement potential in our inventory management. And this overall is providing, and we will have a full leverage of our increasing volumes, of our operational excellence by efficiency, by COPS optimization, by product costs. So we are very optimistic that we are not only growing to 2.8 up to 3.2 billion in the year 2030, we are also optimistic that our adjusted EBIT margin will grow beyond 20% in the same time range.
A lot of exciting things and trends to keep an eye on there, and I love that summary and that optimism, and we certainly share that optimism with you, Alexander. Thank you so much. At this point, I have to say we covered a lot in this discussion in a short period of time, and I'm sure our audience will find this conversation fascinating. But before we close, I do need to state the following. To clarify, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of Wisdom Tree and in this episode, RENK, and are subject to change. Anything we present in this podcast is not intended to be relied upon as a forecast, research, nor as investment or tax advice. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are not a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any securities, and reliance upon them is at the sole discretion of the listener. Please remember, past performance is no indication of future results. Alexander, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on the show, and I love that this is hopefully a start of a new conversation, and we take you up on that offer of visiting one of your facilities on the ground And we look forward to tracking all the exciting things that are going to come from RENK in 2026 and beyond.
Mobeen, thank you very much. It was a good talk. Much appreciated. Greetings to all the investors in the game. Please come to visit us. Thank you very much.
Thank you to everyone who tuned in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Next Big Thing. And if you want to hear more from us, please subscribe on whichever platform you're using. And of course, do take a moment to leave a 5-star rating. And of course, for more information, visit Wisdom Tree's website. And we will see you all next time.